after the Ultimate Fighter, and let's get to the recap. This is episode 4 of the Ultimate Fighter, season 9, and we have Team Henderson getting to pick the fight, and they pick, after trying to figure out who's on weight and who's not on weight, they were looking at Richie Winson. I don't know why, because Richie was at 168 and he's a 155er, so he was actually pretty off weight. And Mark Miller, who is underweight. The reason for that is Mark Miller is not a welterweight. He has fought at welterweight, and most of his career was there, but he's recently been a lightweight, so he's a little bit light and a little bit short. You'll kind of note that that's a little obvious throughout the season, I think. Anyways, they pick Nico Shipshack. You can finally say the name. Which was, I thought originally was a good idea, except then I realized the reach advantage really favored Shipshack. And, you know, I know Mark Miller well. He's one of the fighters I've seen fight a lot, and I can kind of more accurately say what his weaknesses and what his strengths are. His strengths are his boxing. His weaknesses is pretty much everything else. So yeah, Bisping's pretty good to say that he's a one-dimensional fighter. Although actually his ground game is decent. Like he went to the ground with Delson Heleno in the IFL and survived with him. And Delson Heleno's a highly decorated black belt. So he does have ground defensive game, but not a lot of offense. And you know, it's still a bit deficient. He doesn't. Sorry. He doesn't use a lot of kicks and a lot of knees. And his wrestling, for a guy who trains at the Midwest Combat Academy or Hell House, which are kind of linked, along with Joey Gilbert's submission fighting, he has none of those skills that those three gyms are, like, you know, kind of famous for, which is weird. If you want a fighter that comes out of there, Clay Guida, Chase Beebe train from those three camps. And I mean, those camps are known for wrestling and cardio, and Mark Miller doesn't really seem to have either. Anyways, as for drama in the house, we get the prank started. General rule here: David Faulkner, don't lend anything to him. So he left his shirt, and they got vandalized. And he left Ross's wrestling shoes, and they got vandalized. So don't lend anything to Dave Faulkner. Childish, really. The Brit guys don't seem really bothered by the T-shirt. Ross was pissed about the wrestling boots, and I get that, because that's a somewhat major thing, a touchy subject, like Cameron Dollar said. UK not really reacting to it though, and Bisping telling them not to, which is surprising, because I thought Bisping is completely different as a coach than he was as a fighter, which I guess is a good thing. I just got up. What else did we have in the house? Nothing else really, actually. We learned Nico Shipshack fought Southpaw, which I knew, but I didn't know he was not really a Southpaw. He's a switchy. He could fight Orthodox or Southpaw. And I would say it probably looks like he fights Orthodox better than he fights Southpaw. We also learned that he was brought in to help Bisping train for Chris Lieben. On a side note on the pranking, though, it seems to be really a small group of the U.S. guys, mainly Demarcus Johnson, Frank Lester, and that's kind of it, actually. It seems to really just be those two. And like Jason Dent said, it's not me, man. I have no idea. So some of the U.S. guys seem pretty cool. Mark Miller, Jason Dent, Cameron Dollar, even, who I thought looked like a bit of a douchebag when he got in the house, but they seem cool. The Brit guys, yeah, Bisping's really happy because they work really hard, which is good. We're seeing actually some good, you know, intense training from the Brit guys. We met the assistant coaches. Some names didn't really mean much to me. Dan Henderson's boxing guy, I've never actually heard of, which is, you know, probably not a good thing, but what can I say? I haven't heard of the man. But I have heard of his other coach, Cyril Dabadi, of course, is a Pride vet. He's a very good Thai boxer, actually, very good. Heath Sims is a really good wrestler. He's a failure as an MMA fighter, I would have to say, but as a wrestler, he's a very skilled wrestler. Dan, I can't even remember his first name now, but Feliciano, the BJJ coach, he's a pretty well-known guy. Mario Nato, they kept calling him Mario Sukara, but that's actually his nickname. But whatever, if he's got no problem with it, I got a problem with it. But yeah, he fought in the UFC before, fought Eddie Sanchez and lost. Some of you may know him from that. But he's also like a very good BJJ guy, Abu Dhabi competitor. And we have also Dave Jackson, who's basically one of the leaders of the Wolf Series, a Thai boxing guy. So it's a good coaching staff on both sides. I don't really quite know where to give the advantage to. I think Dave Jackson maybe is a better BJJ guy, or not BJJ, Muay Thai guy, and I think also Mario is a better BJJ guy than Dan Henderson's coach. But at the same time, Dan Henderson has a pretty good wrestling advantage. He has more of a straight boxing coach, which maybe will offset that. We learn a little bit about Nick Oshipshak, kung fu guy at university. He was national champion in Britain in kung fu, and then he went to an MMA club and got his ass kicked, and then he just gave up kung fu at that point. We see Bisping's thoughts on Mark Miller, which are pretty correct, actually. I would say he does know what a knee is. He actually has some decent clinch work, but yeah, based on that fight, I would say they were pretty much spot on, and they came up with a good game plan. And the fight itself, you know what, I was really kind of looking forward to this fight until they started telling Nick to take it down, just because you have two guys who are primarily strikers, and you know that makes a good striking match, but it doesn't always make a good grappling match. It was still an okay fight, but the ground bits were really sloppy. You will see, if you want to see how not to use a mount, watch this fight for Nick Oshipshak in the second round. I would say it's one of the most ineffective uses of the mount I've ever seen. Mark Miller refused to give up on guillotines. Nick, I think, was the better grappler, but I think I did give the first round to Mark Miller because he did end up on top. I think he was winning the striking battle a little bit, but in the end, Nick Oshipshak with the knockout feet high kick, and oldest trick in the book: look down, throw high, and it worked. So Oshipshak wins. It is the elimination of one of the more well-known USA guys, Mark Miller, but like this being said, and although like when I was looking at the list of entries for the season, I was thinking, because I hadn't seen Mark Miller fight in a while, I was hoping his wrestling had gotten a lot better, you know, training where he is, and it doesn't seem to have. And Oshipshak basically eliminates. I would still say he's not the weakest welterweight on USA. I think that is Frank Lester, who was brought in as a late one, and I've seen his fights, and he's decently well-rounded, but I'm not terribly impressed. I think their best bet is DeMarcus Johnson, with Jason Pierce being number 2 now. Next week we see 2 fights. We see the American team start to splinter, which is not good. I think they came in really overconfident. This is not the best UK team they could have assembled, but this is really far away from the best US team they could have assembled. I mean, some of these guys really, I don't want to say don't belong on the show, but no one I've talked to has heard of them. And we're talking about some people that are actually from their states. But that's beside the point. Anyways, talk to you next week, and